here. All right. Welcome, everyone, and Happy New Year. Can you still see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. This is the Hawaii Aquaculture Tech and Research Brown Bag, sponsored by NILHA and the Hawaii Aquaculture Collaborative, which is facilitated by UH Sea Grant College Program. Our usual housekeeping, the recording of today's session and slides will be posted on our website, hiaquacollab.org. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and use the hand raising feature or chat, or just raise your hand and jump in to ask questions and make comments during our discussion. For those of you here for the first time, this is the Tech and Research Working Group of the Collaborative. We're here to provide a space for Hawaii aquaculture industry leaders and stakeholders to collaborate on aquaculture solutions. Our format is about 10 to 15 minutes of background and a problem the industry is trying to solve, and the rest of the time will be for questions, discussion, and possible solutions. Our schedule is usually every second Wednesday of each month at noon, but this month we're having it on the third Wednesday. If you have an aquaculture tech and research problem you'd like to solve, please contact Kai, and for more info, please see our website. Our sessions are scheduled for 30 minutes, but people have been staying on a bit longer for a discussion. Next month is another exception to our regular schedule. We just heard that the Ag Day is coming back to the Capitol on February 9th. In collaboration with Ron Wiedenbach and HAAA, we will be seeking to represent the subsectors of aquaculture to legislators, staffers, and stakeholders. Ron mentioned that past attendance is over 2,000, so it's well attended. Hopefully HAAA is able to secure some space for us, and when we know more, we'll work through our steering committee to find industry representatives for Ag Day. Also, on February 15th at noon here online, Ron will be discussing the aquaculture bills in play and how the industry can support aquaculture legislation this session. So hope to see you next month. And now let's get to our main event. We'd like to welcome John Dobovan, president and founder of Kula Haven Farms, Hawaii's first commercial rainbow trout aquaponics farm. Prior to Kula Haven, John was a partner in Nalalicious Farm. And prior to that, he had a long, successful career as a film producer. So John is here today to discuss how aquaculture projects can get funded. Welcome, John. Thank you for connecting with us today.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate that very much. Thanks for the nice intro. Before we get started, I just want to emphasize that, as far as I'm concerned, today is not just about me and my little farm, but I'm hopeful that our little operation can kind of be a poster child for some of the problems that exist in the industry currently that we need to address as a group and as a state. So
carpet because when I had bought the plants.
Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen here. So my aquaponics story really dates back to August of 2011, actually. I moved into what was essentially a scrap pile in Waimanalo. And I was very concerned. I moved in just because it was a cheap place to live, but I was already very, very concerned about food security and global warming and all the other things that I think we collectively are concerned about. And I quickly saw the potential in this particular property for aquaponics. I've convinced my buddy Elko Evans, who also lived on the property, to build it into an aquaponics farm. And so in 2012, we did. We created Nalalicious Farm, and we were raising, various vegetables and Chinese catfish and tilapia. And this was our very first day at Farmers Market. We were really just getting started. And I knew I didn't have the background, so I went back to school. I started taking classes. I just started taking classes at Windward College, aquaponics, aquaculture, and so on. I took all the workshops I could find, and we were really getting off the ground with Nalalicious. We would actually reach break even, and the owner died, and we lost our lease. So I moved to Kula with the stupid idea of raising rainbow trout. I built a little test system up in Keokea at about 3,000 foot elevation, and built a small trout hatchery, and started testing stuff. Once I had actually got my first crop of trout, I had like 30 fish. I got to 1 pound market size. I got discovered basically by Perry Bateman, the executive chef at Mama's Fish House. He became my primary customer and remained that right up through last month. He bought almost all the fish I raised for the first 5 years, actually, extremely supportive. And then I finished up my ag degree, as it turned out, at UH Maui, and I started looking for land. I found a couple of acres to lease on Poli Poli Road up in Kula, 3,500 foot. Really wasn't ideal terrain, but it was all I could find. And, the lease terms weren't ideal, but I couldn't find anything else. So I started clearing land. For about a week, it was just me and a chainsaw. And I quickly wised up and hired a bunch of 20-somethings to help me build the thing out. And, we leveled out the land and built all the grow beds, and built a trout hatchery, and started producing a lot of fish. Actually, I was hatching about 2,000 eggs a month. My old buddy Elko came over, and he built all the fish tanks for me. Clay there in the center, the big lanky 6'2" guy, those are 15-foot diameter tanks. And then we built the structure to house everything, and ended up with six fish tanks, so about 24,000 gallons total, and 14 grow beds, about 4,000 square feet. This is what I consider a module. I was trying to come up with a system design that could be replicated. This was roughly the smallest scale that I could design that could hopefully break even. Fred Lau told me a long time ago, it's hard to make money at a small scale farming, and he was absolutely right, especially with aquaponics. But we had essentially 1/3 of an acre of total working area between the hatchery and the fish tanks and grow beds. And we got a lot of traction right off the bat. In addition to Mama's, which, as I say, remained our primary client, we had about a dozen other restaurants that would buy from us whenever I had extra trout. We also started experimenting with smoked trout, and that was very well received. Smoked trout is just amazing. And then the watercress did very well. We ended up moving away from bunched watercress as traditionally sold, and put it in sealed bags, which last for a couple of weeks, refrigerated. And we ended up with most of Maui as our retail clients, as well as all the Time supermarkets on Oahu, and selling to some distributors as well. Our targets were pretty high. We were hoping to do 1,000 pounds of trout a month and 2,000 pounds of watercress. We never quite met those targets all in the same month, but we came close a bunch of times, especially towards the end. You can see, we started off, our first watercress harvest was May of 2018. First trout was in shortly thereafter. And we were just getting started really at the end of 2019 when COVID hit. So 2020, our sales went to almost nothing. But by the end, we finally did reach break even. If you look at the fourth quarter down here, fourth quarter 2022, we finally hit over $40,000 for the quarter, and actually the last month, December, we hit almost 16,000, and that was 1 week shy of the month. We stopped harvesting just before Christmas, so we actually lost a month, a week of sales. It would have been another $3,000 or $4,000 higher if we continued harvesting. Like any farm, we had our share of trauma, all the usual stuff, and then COVID made it a lot worse, of course, because we were really dependent upon restaurants when we first started. All of our trout sales were to restaurants. The majority of our watercress sales were to restaurants. When COVID hit, we pivoted to increasing our retail watercress sales. I helped start the Maui Food Hub, and that became our only outlet for trout sales. But we were losing money like crazy, and we fell behind on both rent and electricity. And, I was really hoping and expecting we'd get some sort of support. There was support for consumers, for utility bills and rent. There was support for bars and restaurants, but as far as I could find, nothing for farmers. We were determined to soldier on. We kind of clawed our way back. 2022 started off pretty good, but in late spring, we got hit again with a massive seed bug infestation that wiped out our watercress crop. just as we were getting over that, there was an island-wide power outage, one of many that I've experienced here on Maui. And this time it got us. We lost about a third of our fish. We lost 4,000 trout, basically all of our big fish and almost all the small fish. That was kind of the final straw. My landlord canceled the lease and asked us to move off the property by the end of the year, which we did. It's not entirely a tragedy, though. Actually, in a lot of ways, we succeeded. We basically completed the research and development work that we set out to do. You know, we ended up with one module that was working very well for both watercress and trout. By the fourth quarter, we were at least breaking even on both products, and it was working pretty well, actually. Had we continued, it would have been even better. But we got to the break-even point. More importantly, we had established products, we had customers, we had market share, and our closure has really generated an awful lot of publicity, which has been actually quite helpful. I'm getting a lot of offers for land and potential capital partners. Nothing definite yet, but there's some interesting possibilities on the table. And most importantly, I think we've got our core team in place. And we've got lots of former woofers and interns who are very eager to return and continue the job. So our team basically is me. I've now got 10 years of aquaponics experience, 8 years with trout. Amy Greenwood has been with me for the last 5 years. She's my vice president. She's my rock. She's just solid and steady. She's meticulous and very detail oriented. My opposite in that regard, and a great counterpoint for me. And Kevin Hopkins has been my advisor for about 8 years. But for those of you who know Kevin, he has some family trauma of his own for a number of years and has only recently become available again, but he's back on the team. And we're ready to launch phase 2. As I said, it became abundantly clear to me it's very, very difficult for a small aquaponics operation to survive. You've got to wear so many hats. It's not just raising the crop. You've got, and especially with trout, having to do the trout hatchery, it was a huge time suck and money suck. I think 80% of my problems were probably in the hatchery, actually. You got to buy feed on a large scale. You got to deal with harvesting and processing and storage and marketing, sales, and distribution. It's really hard on a small scale. But we're going to go to about 6 times what we have. The idea is to build at least 6 modules in phase 2. We want to buy property, build a much bigger farm, and incorporate the things we couldn't do on the last property. We're not allowed to do ecotourism there. We were not allowed to do farm-to-table tours. We want to put in a trout fishing venue. I feel these things will really make us very successful. And then shortly after that, the idea is to launch phase 3, which will be building partner farms. I've had a lot of interest. There's a lot of people I've spoken to who either have land or want to acquire land or want to do this, including people we've trained. The plan is to build a large umbrella farm, I call it the mothership farm, and then start building small farms that can be part of that. And the main farm would still be primarily responsible for stuff like harvesting, processing, storage, marketing, sales, distribution, design, tech support, supplying the fry and the feed. So these individual farms don't have to have their own hatchery. Basically, the farmers could simply produce fish and crops, run them through would eventually become a co-op, I hope, and we can have the advantage of scale while still maintaining small partner farms. And the idea of that, of course, is to build good jobs and housing and so on. So that's really the plan. We'll be hopefully starting phase 2 shortly under Maui Trout Company. We'll be starting new, I expect. And the intent is to address food security while building new farms and training new farmers, providing good jobs and farm worker housing, and hopefully producing an awful lot of food for our community. So that's basically the short version of the story. I'll take questions if anybody has any.
All right. Wow. John, thanks for taking us through that incredible journey that you're still on. We look forward to hearing more about your success for sure. But what questions do we now have from the audience, or perhaps you have a comment or something that John said is resonating with you and your experience? So please go ahead and ask your question.
I have a quick question for you, John.
Yeah, okay.
This is really cool. Thank you so much. That I learned actually a lot, even more every time I talk to you. This Maui Trout Company cooperative mothership idea, do you plan to possibly expand to neighbor islands also?
Absolutely. Once we've got a good working model here, I'd love to do this on all the islands ultimately. Either us or affiliated groups, once we built the template, the model, it can be reproduced quite easily. We had to build a module first. The module can now be replicated, and once we get the the mothership module template working, that can be replicated also. We need a lot more food, and we all know that. And one little farm ain't going to do it. But my goal here on Maui is to build up to 500 farms doing hopefully at least 2,000 pounds of fish per month per farm. It's about 1 million pounds of fish a month is my goal. And I think we can support that. We can't not necessarily sell all that to the local market, but the smoke trout was just brilliant. It was incredible. I think we can export that possibly to Japan or elsewhere. That's for phase 2 work, is developing that, plus value-added products like dehydrated watercress. Experimented with that also. The idea is to build an export industry. When the boats stop coming, we'll have food for our people.
Do you imagine sticking with water? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Darren.
No. Go ahead. Ask your question first, and I'll follow up.
Sorry, I don't mean to keep asking questions, but just wanted to, your vegetable crop, are you planning to kind of stick with watercress now that you sort of worked out the kinks with that one?
Well, we're going to stay. I don't want to do it exclusively. I should add, I never intended to monocrop. I'm well aware of the dangers, and I've experienced the dangers of monocropping. But because this whole thing was a giant science experiment, I wanted to reduce the variables. That's why I went with just 2 crops, just trout and watercress. They pair really well together. But obviously, we're going to need to diversify a lot. But I do believe there's room for a lot more watercress in the market.
So my question is, so how did you settle on doing trout as your fish species?
Well, that was a matter of the heart, I suppose. Part of it was, when I first started back in Waimanalo, the thing that I saw was that everybody that starts an aquaponics farm is doing tilapia and manoa lettuce. And I said to myself back in 2012, how much tilapia and manoa lettuce can we eat? We need to do something different. I've always loved trout. And I actually wanted to do it back in Waimanalo, but I quickly discovered that there was no way to get cold enough water, and it was just too daunting. So my only solution was to go up, up country, and Kula had the right environment for that. But the thing about trout is that it's not being produced by third world countries. There's a relatively small supply. There's none in Hawaii. So it gave us a unique market niche. And I think that's pretty important. I really think we need to diversify our crops, as has happened in the last couple of years with like the Kona Kampachi folks, for example. We need to do a lot more of that.
Thanks, John. I think David has a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. I had a follow-up question. So John, how many employees then, when you were at full operation, how many employees did you have?
Well, actual employees, I only had one half. Amy was on half time with me for 5 years. She's a trooper.
Okay.
Because we were paying exorbitant, we were paying $3,000 a month rent for an acre and a half, and electricity bill was up to over $6,000 by the end. Without owning the property, without having photovoltaics, we were really cash starved. So I had to depend on woofers. We typically had about 5 to 6 woofers at a time, and plus me and Amy. We didn't need those people most of the time, but on harvest days, the way we were doing watercress was very labor intensive. It took 6 to 8 people the better part of a day, twice a week, to harvest all our watercress. Trout, not so much, but still, took a fairly good crew. So I really needed a big crew, roughly 3 days a week, and woofers provided that. But I'd much rather pay people.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
David?
Yeah, hi. Thanks. All this sounds really nice, and wish you the best in all the endeavors. And my question is that uh, the present day kind of outlook is, and one of the big areas that people are focusing on is workforce development. And I know as you're expanding, you may not be thinking about this, but do you, or you may have, but do you have any plans or openings for interns or other folks from the entire region, not just Hawaii, in terms of coming in and interning on your facility?
Yeah, thanks, David. That's a great question. That's a huge part of our plan, actually. That's really the basis, the foundation for a lot of the partner farms. The woofing program we had, I really considered it an internship program. We had most of the people came through were just standard woofers, but we had some gems that were really interested in learning, and that's what I'm looking for. Ideally, what we want to do is buy some property, put in farm worker housing, and because there's no size limit on that here on Maui, we could build dormitory style housing and give people a place to live, feed them, and pay them roughly half the month, which saves us a lot of money, but it also allows them to keep their overhead down. So all the money they make is, basically profit. And those people who go through that program will be the foundation of our phase 3 development, where we're putting new farmers on land and helping them build out their own farms. My dream is that to raise capital sufficient to help people buy land and help them build their own farms. And then after 3 years, they're, a commercial farmer, they can go to the USDA, get a loan to buy that out. So the investors get the reasonable return on their income, on investment rather. And now we got a whole new farm, a new farmer making money on their own land. That's really my goal. I want to see hundreds of new farmers. We need them. Can't just be old guys like me.
I hear that. Kind of a follow-up is what kind of a timeline are you looking at?
Well, we want to start the new farm this year, hopefully in the next couple of months. It's going to take about a year to build it out. As soon as it's operational, functional, we want to start launching phase 3 as well. We can do them pretty much simultaneously because the main farm will be the hatchery, and the hatchery we can expand that, very quickly and very easily. And same thing with the grow out. And we provide roughly 150 gram fish to new farms that we can help construct. So I'd like to see this whole thing well underway in the next 3 years.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you.
I think Neil has a question.
Yeah, Neil.
Yeah. Thanks, John, for the presentation. Really appreciate it. It's fascinating stuff. My question is, I'm no investor, but I've sat across the table from investors multiple times. I think I have some understanding of the sorts of questions that they will ask. And I think one of their concerns might be if you're going to go and have this franchising model and really increase the scale of production, you're going to have some issues with price elasticity. I'm not sure if that's exactly the right term, but just, are you going to be able to hold that price that you're currently getting for the trout and the watercress in the market? I guess it's price inelasticity is what you're looking for there. I think you have, I think, a great opportunity here to find a scale that works for you and hopefully do the fee fishing and the tours and the farm to table and all of that. And I can see that working really well at some appropriate scale for you. But once you start to franchise and you've got lots of other product coming onto the market, I think that's going to start to eat away at your margins. And that's the way I think that an investor would look at this. I don't know if you've got thoughts on that, just where are your margins and how much trout can you really absorb here in Hawaii?
Yeah, really good point, Neil. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, right now we're getting premium prices. We were selling our trout for $8 a pound until Chef Perry asked me to raise it to 10. That's the first time I've had a customer do that. I don't know how long we can hold that price once there's more fish on the market. But at the same time, while fish stocks are dwindling and prices are going up everywhere else, if we just hold the $10 and everything else rises above us, we may be just okay. But we don't really need $10 a pound if we've got photovoltaic power and if we own the property. Just on that little 30-acre operation, we were spending $100,000 a year just on electricity and rent. You take that away, we had a massive profit. And I think that kind of thing can be employed elsewhere. And by the way, I don't like calling these franchise farms. I don't see this as a franchise model. I consider these partner farms because the intention is that they're going to end up owning the farm. We would probably have some sort of a percentage as a, for the co-op, for the mothership kind of overall umbrella. But I really see it as more a co-op model.
Yeah, I think actually thanks for that. I think it's sometimes called, Kevin Hopkins, if he was on the call, would recognize it perhaps as a nucleus estate model, which is something that has been done in the Philippines and Indonesia for various agricultural industries. And it's something we've talked about a lot. Using. But I'm still, nervous about once you start to move that much fish into the market, you're going to have some softening in your prices, and you ought to be ready to be able to address that question when an investor asks it, I think.
Okay, that's a good point. Thanks. But the other part of that too is we really are looking to doing export products as well. Smoked trout, dehydrated watercress, among other things. Because, I recognize that we can't necessarily sell everything as much as we want to create in the local market, but point taken. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the discussion. And, John and Neil, you both mentioned investors. So John, we were curious about your other funding sources. You mentioned that you have some offers from investors, but have you gone for any of the SBIR funding or any other kind of support in that way?
Yeah, I had intended to do an SBIR proposal this year, but frankly, I couldn't pull it together fast enough. I was too busy harvesting watercress and making deliveries. Next year, absolutely, I'm planning to do an SBIR proposal. I've got actually 3 of them that in mind, 3 different projects in mind. So yeah, we'll be tackling that. There's a couple of other things too. There's this partnerships through climate smart commodities I'm looking at, and various other funding, things like that.
Yeah, thank you. I've never heard of that funding before. And I know you're not in Honolulu County, but the city and county of Honolulu currently has some kind of grant RFP in process for those businesses who experienced loss during COVID. So if you're in Honolulu County, please look that up and we'll try to get the link on our website too. But any other questions or comments from the audience?
I was just curious, what's the selling price, the farm gate price for your plant products? And are you only doing one?
For the watercress?
Yes.
Yeah, we've only done one crop so far. We were actually getting $6 a pound for our watercress, and when we bagged it, it was more like a microgreen. It actually worked out to $8 a pound. We were wholesaling it for $3 for a 6-ounce bag.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That's probably the most expensive watercress on the planet, but
Yeah.
we couldn't keep up with the demand. We could never ever grow enough to satisfy the demand. We had orders for 3 times what we were growing, so the demand was amazing.
Wow. Yeah. Any other questions or comments for John before we sign off today? Well, John, I personally am excited to eat trout. I'm a trout lover. I'm a fish lover. I'm excited to eat all kinds of fish that's available locally. So, personally, I'm in full support of your project, and thank you so much for coming on today and speaking to the industry. And also thanks for your contact info. So all of you, please go ahead and contact John if you have questions that come up later. But any final comments from the audience or any last questions before we sign off? All right.
I just want to say, Gene, thank you very much for organizing this, and thank all of you for your time and attention. I really appreciate it a lot. And I hope together we can create something, a more, hospitable environment for aquaculture and aquaponics in the state of Hawaii, because we really need it.
Absolutely.
Marvelous, John. Aloha.
Thank you so much, everyone. Mahalo, John. Talk with you
Thank
all
you,
soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, thank you.